1450 to 1750 inventions by me, starting with the magnetic compass. Who made it? The Chinese were the first to develop the magnetic compass. It was originally created during the Han Dynasty, but it became especially useful for navigation during the Song Dynasty around the 11th and 12th centuries. What is it exactly? It's a navigation tool that uses Earth's magnetic field to show direction. It has a magnetized needle that always points north, helping travelers know where they are going even when the sun or stars aren't visible. Where was it invented? It started in China, but later spread through the Indian Ocean trade network into the Islamic world and eventually reached Europe through trade routes like the Silk Roads. When did this happen? The earliest form appeared around the 2nd century BCE, but it started being useful for navigation by the 11th century CE and reached Europe by the 13th century. Now, why was it invented? People needed a reliable way to navigate, especially sailors and traders who traveled long distances where landmarks and stars couldn't always guide them. How did it work? A small magnetized needle was placed on water or on a pivot so it could spin freely. It aligned with Earth's magnetic field and pointed north, giving travelers a constant reference for direction. The causes behind its invention came from the growing need for long-distance trade and exploration, especially in Asia, and advances in China's science and technology. And finally, the effects were huge. The magnetic compass made sea travel safer and more accurate, helping expand trade networks across the Indian Ocean and Mediterranean. It also played a major role in the age of exploration when European explorers like Columbus and Vasco da Gama began global voyage. Next, the Latin cell. Who developed it? The Arabs are credited with developing and perfecting the Latin cell, though it was influenced by earlier Mediterranean and Indian Ocean sailing traditions. It became especially important for sailors in the Islamic world during the or during the medieval period. What is the Latin cell? It's a triangular cell mounted at an angle on the mast of a ship. Unlike square sails that could only catch wind from behind, the Latin cell could catch wind from different directions, allowing ships to sail almost against the wind, something earlier sails couldn't do. Where was it used? It was first used in the Indian Ocean and Mediterranean Sea, where trade networks connected Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and Europe. Why was it important? Sailors needed more maneuverable and efficient ships that could travel land distances, even when wind conditions were idle. The landing cell gave ships the flexibility to move through the sea more easily and safely. How did it work? The triangular shape allows sailors to angle the sail to capture wind from the side, not just from behind. This made it possible to tack or sail diagonally into the wind, a major breakthrough for navigation. The causes behind its development came from the growth of Indian Ocean trade and the need for better sailing technology to connect the different regions of Afro-Eurasia. The effects were massive. The Latin sail made it possible to sail longer distances, expand trade routes, and link regions through commerce and cultural exchange. It eventually influenced European ship designs like the caravel, which helped launch the age of exploration. Next, the astrolabe. Who developed it? The Greeks first designed early versions of the astrolabe around the 2nd century BCE, but it was Muslim scholars during the Islamic Golden Age who perfected it for navigation. It made truly useful for travelers and sailors. Was it? What is an astrolabe? The astrolabe is an instrument used to determined latitude by measuring the angle of the stars or the sun above the horizon. In other words, it helped sailors figure out where they were on Earth when they were far from land. Where was it? Where was it used? It was mainly used across the Islamic world in North Africa, the Middle East, and later spread to Europe through contact during trade and the Crusades. When was it used? While the Greeks invented it, it became most popular between the 8th and 15th centuries, especially during the Age of Exploration when European navigators relied on it for long sea voyages. Why was it important? Sailors needed a way to find their positions at sea, especially when land and familiar landmarks weren't visible. The astrolabe gave them a scientific tool to calculate their location and stay on course. How did it work? The astrolabe had a flat metal disc with a movable arm. By sighting a star or the sun and reading the angle, sailors could determine their latitude, how far north or south they were, and use that to guide their journey. The causes behind its development came from advances in astronomy and mathematics in the Islamic world and the growing need for accurate navigation for trade across the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean. The effects were huge. The astrolabe made long-distance sea travel much safer and more reliable. It allowed sailors to cross oceans with greater confidence, helping expand global trade networks and paving the way for the European age of exploration. Next is the astronomical charts. Who used them? Sailors and astronomers were from many cultures, especially the Chinese, Greeks, and later Muslims and European navigators relied on astronomical charts. They became especially valuable in Indian Ocean and European explorers during the Age of Exploration. What are the astronomical charts? They're maps of the stars and constellations that help sailors identify their position and direction of sea. By knowing where certain stars appeared in the sky at specific times, sailors could guide their voyage even without modern instruments. Where were they used? Astronomical charts were used all over the world, from the Indian Ocean and Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, basically anywhere sailors needed to navigate long distances. When did they appear? The earliest star charts go back thousands of years, but they became especially useful for navigation between the 13th and 17th century as global exploration and travelers expanded. Why was why were they important? Because compasses and modern technology, sailors needed a way to find their direction and location at night. Astronomical charts gave them a reliable map of the sky, helping them use the stars, especially the North Star Polaris, to steer their ships. How did they work? Sailors could look at the stars, compare what they saw with the patterns in their charts, and use the positions of constellations to estimate their latitude and direction. These charts worked together with other navigation tools like the astrolabe and compass to make travel more accurate. The causes behind their use came from the growth of sea trade and the need for reliable navigation across vast oceans. Different civilizations created and shared these charts as they exchanged knowledge through trade and exploration. Some of the effects were astronomical charts helped sailors travel further and more safely, expanding maritime trade networks and enabling the European age of exploration. They also encouraged advances in astronomy and science as people studied the skies and to improve navigation. The next one is the caravel. Who developed it? The Portuguese designed and perfected the caravel in the 15th century during the early stages of age of exploration. It became the main ship used by explorers like Prince Henry the Navigator, Bartolomeu Dias, and Vasco da Gama. What was a caravel? The caravel was a small, fast, and highly maneuverable sailing ship. It combined European hull designs with Arab ladding sails, allowing it to sail efficiently in both deep and shallow waters and even against the wind. Where was it used? It was first built and used along the Atlantic coast of Portugal and Spain, but soon traveled across the Atlantic Ocean, the African coast, and across to the Indian Ocean during a voyage of exploration. When did it appear? The caravel was developed in the 1400s during the 15th century and became one of the most important ships for European exploration between 1450 and 1600. Why was it important? European nations wanted to find new trade routes to Asia, Africa, and the Americas. They needed ships that were fast, durable, and able to handle long ocean voyage, and the caravel was perfect for that. How did it work? The caravel used a combination of ladding sails, triangular sails for steering and sailing against the wind, and square sails for speed with the wind. This mix made it extremely versatile and allowed explorers to travel further and faster than before. The causes behind its development came from the growing European desire for exploration and trade, as well as advancements in shipbuilding and navigation during the Renaissance. Some of the effects were the caravel made it possible for European explorers to cross the Atlantic, sail around Africa, and reach Asia and the Americas. It directly contributed to the age of exploration, global trade expansion, and the beginning of European overseas empires. The next one is the caravel. Who developed it? The Portuguese were the first to develop the caravel in the 15th century, and it was later used by Spanish explorers as well. It became one of the main ships during the age of exploration for long distance ocean voyage. What was a caravel? The caravel was a large multi-masted sailing ship built for long sea journeys. It was bigger and stronger than earlier ships like the caravel and could carry more cargo, supplies, and crew, making it ideal for trade and exploration across oceans. Where was it used? It was built in Portugal and Spain, then used throughout the Atlantic Ocean along the coast of Africa and across the Indian Ocean and Atlantic routes to the Americas and Asia. When did it appear? The caravel was developed in the 14th and became widely used in the 15th and 16th centuries. During the haze of European exploration, why was it important? Explorers needed large and durable ships that could survive long voyages, carry goods for trade, and store enough food and water for their crew. The caravel's design allowed it to travel farther and stay at sea longer than earlier ships. How did it work? The caravel had three or four moulds with a mix of square sails for speed and ladding sails for steering. It also had a high rounded hull for stability in rough waters and large decks for cannons, making it useful for both trade and defense. The causes behind its creation came from Europeans' growing desire to explore new trade routes to Asia and Africa, along with advancements in shipbuilding technology inspired by contact with the Islamic world, and the effects were major. The caravel allowed European explorers to sail across the Atlantic and Indian Ocean, leading to the discovery of new lands and the establishment of global trade empires. It also influenced the design of later ships like the galleon, which continued to expand European power overseas. And that's the end.